So I also noticed that none of you said Senator Harris, which I think that a lot of people might think, oh, black woman, black women.
That's wrong.
Talking about Harris, so I'm just not connecting with her at all.
Again, with Joe Biden picking Kamala Harris as his running mate, that's another form of pacification. So they could say, okay, we hope these black people will shut up now. I hope they're happy. You know, we hope that we can pacify them. And if you're really aware of what's going on, you won't fall for it.
Kamala Harris.
I found Kamala Harris abrasive from the beginning. I thought that she assumed to have achieved the black vote, which when you assume which way my support should go, it shows that you have commodified my interests.
We don't agree with you just because of the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. That's one thing America has to understand about the black race. It's
kind of insulting even.
Yeah.
It's insulting.
It really is, because it's almost like you're saying we don't have our own ideas and views, which we do, beyond race.
I just can't deal with what she's done in terms of increasing mass incarceration rates. And as they say, all skin folk ain't kin folk, and she doesn't give off that vibe like she's actually doing everything in the best interest of people.
What I've read so far about her, they were saying that she was kind of harsh on African Americans, especially on drug charges and things like that.
And lastly, Kamala Harris is speaking tonight. The media is gushing over her, you know, first black woman on a ticket. Could she do anything to make you think she's different or would govern differently than Obama? Because frankly, she might be president sooner than people think. I mean, Biden's older, he cognitively has lost a step or two. Mm-hmm. Is there anything she could do or say that would, you know, make you think differently?
There's absolutely nothing Kamala Harris can say that'll have me on her side at all.
It's the faithless logician, dropping what's been missing, coming for the jugular, but not let me catch you slipping. No tool needed other than my mind to dissect these delusions and correct them in real time. The slayer of dogma and baseless assertions don't come with that weak shit or you'll soon need a surgeon. But it's too late for your argument. It's been torn to shred. There is no coming back. It is completely dead. All I need is my brain and my pen to use as I see fit to flay and or mend these inexcusable policies that are impossible to defend. All I need is my brain and my pen. No trust needed, just take a second and listen as I redirect and clear your clouded attention to focus on the facts, evidence, and testable predictions, painting a picture to help explain these insights, hypotheses, and suspect claims, giving you the tools needed to separate the truth from the false and the utterly inane. The marks are legion and too many to name, but they all love money, bathing in it with no shame, while the rest of us fight over their scraps, struggling just to maintain. They've never read a war that they would not fund, yet they treat citizens asking for health care as low-life scum. But we're done asking, so get ready, because here the we come.
You'd think after embarrassingly losing to a political novice, misogynist, racist game show host in 2016 that the Democrats would have spent the last 4 years doing everything they could to learn from their mistakes and would have a brand new strategy rearing and ready to go for the 2020 presidential election. But boy, would you be wrong. Last time around, after the DNC successfully sabotaged the Sanders campaign, completely alienating his supporters in the process, the Democrats made a move for the mythical moderate Republican.
For every blue-collar Democrat we will lose in Western PA, we will pick up 2, 3 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And you can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. The voters who are most out there figuring out what to do are not the blue-collar Democrats. They are the college-educated Republicans who lean Republican or independent and in the suburbs.
But this is nothing new. The Democrats have been chasing Republicans to the right since at least the 90s. From mimicking their draconian tough-on-crime stance leading to the U.S. becoming far and away the world's #1 penal colony, to implementing their corporate-approved for-profit healthcare policies that leave tens of millions of people uninsured and even more underinsured. Which is probably why it's no coincidence that the 2020 Democratic Party convention was full of 90s-era GOP rejects that feel way more comfortable in the current current Democratic Party, not because they themselves have changed so much, but because the party continues to lunge further and further towards the right. Even in the wake of the nationwide protests for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, and others, the Democrats continue to stubbornly stick with the same tired, flawed strategy, choosing to once again disregard their base by nominating the two candidates responsible for locking up more black and brown people than any other 2020 Democratic nominees. The self-proclaimed top cop of California and newly anointed vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris began her career as a tough-on-crime prosecutor in San Francisco. With the help of certain special interest groups with copious sums of money, she was able to unseat one of the nation's most progressive prosecutors to become the city's district attorney, where she served for 7 years, undoing her predecessor's progressive policies, even ending the office's pursuit of the Catholic Church on behalf of its sexual abuse victims, while championing regressive policies such as raising cash bail and incarcerating the parents of truant children, before becoming the state's attorney general for 6, after which she replaced Barbara Boxer as the junior senator from the state of California. This was right around the time of Hillary's epic loss, and apparently the Clinton team saw Harris, a female woman of color that favors right-of-center policies, as the perfect vessel for continuing their neoliberal agenda. So without missing a beat, donors and staffers alike quickly began lining up behind the establishment's new favored figurehead. But strategically, Kamala brings very few new voters to the table. She hails from a solidly blue state, and anyone fooled into believing Kamala Harris is actually for the people was most likely already in the bag for Biden due to his connections with Barack Obama. And the voters themselves made it abundantly clear they didn't want anything to do with Kamala, forcing the self-proclaimed top-tier candidate to drop out after her embarrassing debate performance and before a single vote could be cast.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work.
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you are in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Senator Harris.
Now let's take these one at a time. As Attorney General of California, Kamala was directly responsible for successfully prosecuting over 1,500 people for cannabis-related offenses. Unfortunately, California conveniently does not provide organized, publicly available records on prosecutions, so this number was reached solely by analyzing admissions to state prisons, making the total most certainly smaller than the reality. And as you can see from this chart, starting with 2012, the numbers drop significantly. Though, unfortunately, this isn't some sign of leniency on Harris's part, but rather a reflection of the federally mandated public safety realignment, which, due to overcrowding, saw many low-level nonviolent drug offenders going to county jail or receiving probation, meaning they were not able to be counted. Yet, during an interview on the widely popular morning show The Breakfast Club, Kamala curiously admitted to smoking marijuana and even claimed to be for legalization, despite hypocritically locking up thousands for doing doing the same, not to mention laughing at her Republican opponent for supporting legalization. Though later in the same interview, while being asked follow-up questions about her marijuana use, she kind of gave the game away by claiming she liked to smoke weed in the 80s during college while listening to Tupac and Snoop, two artists that did not begin making music until the 90s. Next up, the curious case of Kevin Cooper, a California death row inmate who should have been and eventually was exonerated thanks to DNA testing, and no thanks to Kamala Harris, who blocked the DNA evidence from being tested while she was the district attorney for San Francisco. Yet when later asked about it, she, quote, feels awful, just awful about this, and is now a staunch supporter of DNA testing. I'm beginning to see a disturbing pattern emerge of Kamala conveniently pivoting to the correct answer once she's no longer in a position to do much about it. And apparently, there's at least 4 other examples of Kamala fighting to keep the wrongfully convicted safely locked up inside of a cell. Feel free to pause the video if you want to learn more. As Attorney General, Harris repeatedly and openly defied the U.S. Supreme Court order to release some 5,000 non-violent offenders. This is in relation to the court ruling requiring the reduction in the state's prison population that I cited earlier, and which was later upheld by the Supreme Court. Though the state was nearly found to be in contempt of court for its constant refusals and continual slow-walking of the order. Legal documents reveal that Harris and her team were condemned by judges and legal experts alike as nonsensical obstructionists acting in bad faith, who at one point even tried to claim that the Supreme Court lacked jurisdiction over the state. The resistance to the ruling was so extreme that it nearly caused a constitutional crisis that would have, quote, undermined the very ability of the federal judges to enforce their legal orders at the state level. And if you're thinking she must have had a good reason for resisting so hard, unless you think slave labor is cool, you would be wrong. The state inexplicably said the quiet part out loud and actually made the case in open court that the nonviolent offenders needed to stay incarcerated in order to protect their source of cheap labor, particularly when it came to the inmates fighting the state's notoriously vicious wildfires, who they graciously pay about $2 a day to fight. And it's now almost perpetually fire season, so what else was the state to do? They couldn't possibly release them and then hire them back as seasonal or even full-time firefighters. If they did that, they wouldn't be able to exploit the for-profit prison system for pennies on the dollar. And isn't that what it's for? Not to mention all the other numerous ways in which we've learned to exploit prison labor, or labor in general. I wonder if this has anything to do with why stock in private prisons soared the day the VP pick was announced. But of course, after being ridiculed in the press, Kamala was shocked. I mean shocked when questioned, and apparently just learning about these arguments 2 months after the fact. As if the lawyers who actually made the arguments were not working directly in line with and under the guidance of the Attorney General in an important case such as this. Another egregious act of the Harris tenure as AG is her utter inaction on Steve Mnuchin in the many illegal foreclosures of West One Bank during the height of the 2008 financial crisis. Even though her own office found over 1,000 forms of fraud in a preliminary investigation and predicted that they would find thousands more if given the opportunity. But luckily for the oligarchs, Kamala was there to make sure that never happened. Though of course this wasn't Harris's fault, but merely a decision made by her office, which either seems to suggest she has no control over her own office or is irreputably corrupt. But considering Kamala received contributions from Mnuchin during her run for Senate, I'm going with the latter. And for a quick refresher on Mnuchin, after making millions fraudulently foreclosing on thousands, including a 90-year-old woman over a 27-cent accounting error, he was tapped by the Trump administration to be Treasury Secretary, and was the sole arbiter over the $4.5 trillion slush fund that was gifted to Wall Street back in March. The details of which he has since refused to make public, meaning the people have no way of knowing where their taxpayer-backed trillions actually wound up. Which is why it's no surprise that Wall Street sighed in relief at the Harris pick, because it strongly signals to them that even if Biden wins, it'll be business as usual, with little to no new regulations or oversight to combat the corruption responsible for no less than 3 financial crises since 2000. That despite being in the middle of a global pandemic and economic crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since the Great Depression, they have Biden and Harris's word that nothing will fundamentally change. If defeating Donald Trump was actually the Democrats' top priority, or gods forbid, taking care of the American people, they'd at least pretend to be for any one of a half dozen overwhelmingly popular policies such as legalizing marijuana, Medicare for all, or ending the wars and reallocating the funds back home where they're so desperately needed. But it's not, so all we know instead is what the Biden-Harris ticket is against. They're against the meek 10% reduction to the Pentagon's bloated budget. They're against Medicare for all. They're against the watered-down Green New Deal. And their platform is practically non-existent. So much so, they even ordered volunteers and surrogates to stay away from talking about policy altogether. And I know a lot of this is hard to hear, but ignoring it or pretending it's not true doesn't help anything and will only work to exacerbate the problem. Vote for Biden and Harris if you must, but just know that you will be voting for the living embodiment of the neoliberal problem that spawned Trump in the first place. But either way, in my opinion, direct action such as nationwide general strikes and targeted protests are going to be needed if we actually want to change anything for the better. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and for fuck's sake, wear your damn mask. Jana.
I'm just here to tell those Biden, Harris voters in the DNC, look, I'm not voting. I'm not voting for the Democrats or the Republicans in this election. And be upset at yourselves while people like me sit at home. Because you can't keep putting these terrible candidates up there and just thinking that we are just going to show up and vote. When we don't show up, don't be mad if Trump gets back in and saying, well, you know, this demographic should be showing up. No, you need to start promoting better candidates. And I'm done voting for bad candidates. I'm just not going to vote blue no matter who. Biden, honestly, with me, I can never get over the fact of how he has done black people his entire political career. I can't get past it. I can't co-sign his record by putting my vote out there. And as far as Kamala Harris goes, her record, the only reason it's not as bad as Biden is because Biden has been in politics a lot longer than her. A lot of you're going to have to depend on these old folks, civil rights voters, and all black women to carry this man over the threshold, because if you think black men are going to come out because you put Kamala Harris on the ticket, knowing what her history is with locking black men up, and then you're going to turn, and then Biden top of the ticket with his horrible record of locking black men up, come on. You just asking black men to stay at home. And you're asking young people to stay at home because there is not one good policy that you can point to and say, Joe Biden's going to be good on that. I don't care.
I just want to shout out to that black trucker that called in because he gets it. I really, that's the whole point of me calling is because of my fear of the loss of black men from the voting cycle. That is my biggest fear, because when Obama got in and then absolutely didn't do anything for black people, what happened in 2016? We lost black men. We lost black men not only to Republican voting, but to non-voting. The only person that wins with this pick is the corporatists. They now pretty much have shore up the next 12 years of corporate-friendly politics. No changes are going to happen. They're not going to be reprimanded for what they have done. This is now going to be the second time that they robbed the public of their funds, and they're not going to be held accountable. And it's crazy. Kamala Harris just a few weeks ago voted against cutting the military budget, but yet all of these other quote-unquote progressive policies she wants to vote for because she knows they're not going to pass.
Yep.
But on the policies where Republicans actually step over and vote with Democrats on, that's the ones, her and the Cory Bookers of the world, that's the ones that they vote against. This is Obama all over again, and it just may be the thing that convinces a lot of black men not to vote, like the caller that came in. I hope that he will at least consider, if he's still on, hearing what I'm saying, he will at least consider voting green. If anything, that would be the best thing, since he said that he's going to vote for the state and local elections, because there are state elections being ran at the same time. as this presidential election, and I hope that he will change his mind and vote green. So maybe we could get 3 people instead of 2, because the duopoly is really killing our democracy, and it's definitely not helping people of color. It's keeping us right where we are, and that helps no one. I do good in life, you know what I'm saying? I'm a truck driver just like him. I own my own truck, and I do very well. But the point I'm trying to make is I got family out here that ain't doing well. I got family out here that young and old. Social Security on one end, not getting enough benefits to take care of business on the other. I got people that lost their jobs who, this is the first week they ain't getting no unemployment of the extra $600, and they don't know what they're going to do going forward. They've saved some money, but going forward, what do? And they're not alone. You know what I'm saying? But they're the ones that are going to be hit the hardest because they're the ones that have the low-paying jobs. They're the ones that do not get the assistance that they need to get to move forward.
Look, you mentioned that you feel like Democrats take you for granted sometimes. But isn't that kind of because they can? I mean, you don't really have another place to go, you mentioned. So why do they need to take a special effort to reach out to you?
If they want to win, they have to.
If one of these days black women decide to sit out and not vote, they're going to see the power that we have over this country.
I mean, could that actually happen?
Yes.
Yes.
In an election against Donald Trump?
Yes.
Yes, we're tired. It's not our job to save the world all the time. Sometimes we need a break.